I need some traction. You need some traction.
Welcome to another Traction webinar here. Excited. It's brought to you by Boast.ai, Launch Academy, Growth Blazers, Lazarides Institute, Founders Institute, and BCF Ventures are our sponsors. Got an exciting session here today. Atlee Clark, who's the Director Operations at Shopify. You've been at Shopify for a while, since 2014, is that right? Wow. And you were just having this conversation, employee number. We don't like to talk about it that way, but what employee number was it?
Let's say there was about 500 people when I started.
500. And you said you're at 8,000 now at Shopify.
Yeah.
That is insane.
And 500, just so you know, that was like the biggest company I'd ever worked for. It was terrifying. So You can imagine what it feels like now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to navigate all that. I'm sure it's amazing. So, super excited to learn more about this. You're the head of the App Store and third-party developer ecosystem, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. So excited to hear about that. But before we get into that, you were the executive director of C100 also. Maybe you could do a little pitch on C100. Maybe not everybody knows what it is, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we start, I will say I'm no longer the head of the App Store, but
okay.
I was for 5.5 years,
Nice.
and handed it over to very, very capable people, and now work on the Shop product, which is a consumer-facing technology. So, anyways, C100. So C100 is an amazing organization whose mission it is to connect early stage and late stage, actually more now, Canadian tech startups with venture capital, partnership opportunities, mentors, et cetera, all based in the Silicon Valley. And really what it does is it collects Canadians in tech who live in the San Francisco Bay Area, who want to give an unfair advantage to Canadians who are starting tech businesses. And they do amazing programs like 48 Hours in the Valley. They have a later stage event called the CEO Tech Forum. It's amazing. If you're not part of it, get on their newsletter. They do lots of great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely get on their newsletter. I was lucky enough to get on their newsletter earlier with my former company, Limelight Platforms, and I attended events when we were doing our road shows, trying to raise funds down in the Valley. We attended some of the C100 events while we were down there. So nice to have some friends if you are down in the Valley to kind of look at that.
Yeah. Or just someone to go for a beer with and be like, this place is crazy, right? And then everybody says yes, and it tells you how to deal with it. Yeah.
Is it me or is this place crazy? No,
is this nuts?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And you're also a co-founder yourself. It's a children's clothing company, Pika Layers. Love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So started this D2C brand 2 years ago with two of my best friends. And, it started just as an idea of a product that we really wanted to see for our own kids. And honestly, it has totally exceeded our expectations. And we're going to do a big launch to the US in the fall. And we're coming out with a whole bunch of new products. And I've learned so much. It gives me such high customer empathy at Shopify because I am a customer. I also make all of our R&D teams very frustrated because I'm like, hi, so feature request. But no, they're great. And they're always appreciate my feedback. And I'm always willing to test things. So it's a win-win.
Right.
I think.
I'm not only an employee, I'm a customer too.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And you also are an active angel investor with Backbone Angels. Were you one of the founders of Backbone Angels? Or amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. 10 women who are either currently at Shopify or previously at Shopify. We got together and decided to launch this angel collective to invest in women-founded companies with a focus on women of color. We really believe that more women on cap tables is good for everyone. And so that is our mission. And it's been amazing. We go through decks every week, and there's so much good stuff out there, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't hit the usual circles, and so we've been able to attract some new fresh faces, which are exciting, and written a bunch of checks already, and it's really good.
There you go. Well, you might get some more inbound off the back of this. So
absolutely.
where can they find it?
Send it to me. Yeah.
Just go to Backbone Angels, search it, and you'll find it. And
perfect. And we have a way, if you have a pitch deck, just submit it there. We go through every single pitch deck that comes through our website. And I'm also happy. You can email me, Atlee@backboneangels.com. you can send it there too.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, that is super cool. So, I mean, one of the great things, and since you've been at Shopify so long, I mean, seeing it grow from 500 employees to 8,000 through an IPO, surpassing probably everybody's expectations on just the growth of the company. Like me as well. Like I totally did not think it was going to achieve the levels it did. It's been absolutely amazing to watch it, and just to hear a little bit more about what you've learned, developing the app ecosystem there, because that's a fascinating topic. So would love to, maybe we could just kind of start it off a summary of like, what is your app ecosystem, just to kind of get everybody on the same page to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what it was when I showed up and cool. What it is today. So, Shopify from day one very much took a platform approach to its core product. We really believe that we stand behind the entrepreneur merchant who wants to launch their business. And so we believe that choice is important and that a merchant should be able to have the store they want, the back end office that they want, et cetera. And so like day one, we had open APIs for developers or people who knew how to manipulate it. And when I arrived, what had started happening was that there was a number of developers out there who were doing custom things for Shopify merchants. And they sort of came to us and said, hey, I keep doing the exact same customization over and over and over again. What if I built an app where I could more easily install it on all these shops, but also potentially sell it to people who can't afford to have, employ me as a freelance developer. Right. And luckily at the time we had already started thinking about how do we bring, niche technologies into the product. And so we launched this app store with those original sort of agency freelance partners, and immediately had great reception from our merchants and from partners. And when I arrived, there was about 40 apps in the app store. There was a great team, but they were very lean, very small. It was a true startup fashion. And we were all just trying to figure out what to do with this thing. What was the future of this thing? And so we went from that to today, where there's over 6,000 apps in our app ecosystem. Last year, app developers made over $230 million selling their apps through our ecosystem. I think the average Shopify merchant has 6 apps installed on their Shopify instance. And so it's turned into this whole business unto itself. And it's a core part of our offering and something that I think differentiated us from the beginning from our immediate competitors, and how we've been able, that plus our amazing product, how we've been able to just like totally get ahead of everybody else.
It was a driver for scale. Yeah. No, it's super interesting. Going back to those early stages and just, I'm trying to frame it in my head. So you have your core roadmap of development, what you're working on. Mm-hmm. And these apps are kind of features that you guys would just never get to because they're a little bit out of scope or they're niche. There's still a market for it, but they're not the market you're going after. This is where you're enabling freelancers to build the features for you almost. Is that kind of a good way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think at that stage, that's exactly what it was. Like we were going to market and we knew like our product, we had great product vision, but obviously you can't do everything.
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
Only 100 engineers. Like, what are you going to do? And so at the beginning, really, we engaged with our partners to get to market faster, right? Like if they could offer a thing that we couldn't build right now that not everybody needed, then great, do that. I think over time that evolved from being more of like a feature filler or go-to-market strategy to really about that, building that, like offering that customization at the level that our customers needed. Like we really believe that every merchant is a little bit different and that they should be able to go and build the store the way they want to, express their brand, operate it the way they want to. And so it really became, how do we connect all of the great technologies that help anybody run a business into their core workflow, which is Shopify? We always had this, we believe that Shopify's product should serve most of the people most of the time and make everything else possible. Right. And that is always how we've thought about the ecosystem, and both from a product perspective, but also from a business perspective on who we engage with, who we don't.
So in those early stages, I get, it's a great question of understanding what is in scope for your go-to-market and what you need to open up. Is there like a minimum stage where you'd start to explore that? Just, you don't want to be too small in thinking about it because it's probably overshooting, but it's like, what do you think would be a sweet spot where you can start to think about it?
Yeah, I think it's like your customers will tell you. I don't think there's like a number or a critical mass or a revenue thing or anything like that. It's like, you have to, you first have to decide, is this approach right for you? And is it going to be a core part of your product? If the answer is yes, then you should be building with that in mind all the time. And so that means like actually build useful, well-constructed APIs. Yeah. That means having engineers spend time doing really great documentation. You don't have to release those APIs or that documentation on day one, but if that's part of your ethos and you have that in your practice, then when you decide that it's time to have a marketplace or start experimenting with one or two partners, you're ready to go, and you can release like a developer advocacy team to go and do that without having to go and like change everything. Yeah. And I think that, a lot of people come to me and they're like, I want to start an app store. I'm like, okay, so who do you report to? They're like, marketing. And I'm like, okay, this could be a problem, just because it's like, you have to really understand what your incentives are, because if you really want to improve your product, then you do need buy-in on the engineering and product side to build that foundation from day one.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. And like, I'm just thinking for some of the early stage entrepreneurs that might be attending here today, I think it also, like, in terms of the product that you're like, a more B2B versus a B2C, or the more customization your solution needs probably equates to the more need for that app ecosystem to exist, right? Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think it's also like, if your product sees your customer having an evolution over time. So like when I think about a Shopify merchant, let's like me, for example, right? So 2 years ago, we start a thing. We're like designing everything ourselves. We don't have any like money to do it. So it's very like, and it's great because Shopify out of the box, and with a little bit of inside knowledge, I can like go and hack. Sorry, Siri got excited. I can go and like hack a Shopify store, right? And hack together a Shopify store, little Canva, a little Shopify. Yeah, you're good.
There you go. Yeah.
But, now we're a fairly big business. Like we have to fulfill out of a third-party fulfillment warehouse. We have freelancers who work for us, like all these kind of things. And so what the app ecosystem does for me, because I'm a changing customer over time, it helps me just like take the steps to get to get to that next step of evolution. And so I can do things like 3 weeks ago, we launched a rewards program, right? With Smile.io, which is a great app in our ecosystem. A year ago, a rewards program, like I had no idea about the cost of acquisition and et cetera, et cetera. Like there was no point in me launching a rewards program, but now I am, and I can install it and launch it the next day. And so that helps me like in my evolution. So if you have customers that go on a cycle and change over time, an app ecosystem can be really, really powerful for them and keeping them on your product, as opposed to going to the like bigger guy, The
bigger guy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it gives you, more breadth of feature sets to make them happy, and keep them engaged long-term, for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how did it kind of evolve over the years? Like what, versus what it was, and then, the changes you saw in it. I mean, I think it's a super unique situation, you being there so long to kind of see it and take care of it over this time.
Yeah, I think there was like some really key milestones along the way that propelled it into what it is today. So, when I arrived, everyone was enthusiastic about the App Store, but we were a startup. We were going public in 10 months. The ability to get an engineer to come and redesign the App Store was like, everyone was like, absolutely not. That's why you're hired, to figure out how to do this without engineers. So I'm like, cool. Okay, on it. Everyone was still doing a great job about thinking about platform and building great APIs, but like the experience, the front end experience was like a thing that just had to get pushed down the priority list. And that was fine. And the right decision at the time for us, to be honest. So then it's like, okay, what do we invest in now? What can we invest in now? And so then it was really about investing in getting out to the world of developers and startups and being like, listen, we are your best channel of acquisition. And this is why. This is what we're doing to build an amazing e-commerce platform that is going to beat everybody in the market. And this is how we want you to participate in that journey with us.
Yeah.
And really spending time doing one-to-one relationship building, just getting out, because everyone was like, why would I do this? Because we were still relatively small. We were not a consumer brand. So people were like, sorry, what do you do? And really, we just got people who really loved, like other developers who really loved what we were building, our vision for the marketplace, and got them to help us do that too. So we used to like pay developers, like app developers, to hold meetups in their towns with their startup communities. And then we're like, we'll pay for it all. And can we come? And they're like, yeah, sure. So it was a lot of that. And then the next thing that happened was we decided to do a developer conference. And we said, okay, we have a story to tell about Shopify, the software. And we think the developer community is the right audience for that. And we started the Unite conference. And that did two things. One, it obviously was like for all of those developers that we had done all that, like one-to-one, getting everybody on board, getting them to build apps and all that kind of things. It gave them a place to come together in a way that they were excited about. And then two, it got everybody inside Shopify's butt in gear, because it was like, okay, we are going to go out to the world and tell them who we are as a platform. Our documentation better be great. You better be able to talk to developers, for all third-party developers, all day long, and really like honing in on what our story was. And I think that was a flip from a platform company that had a nice app store to like the app ecosystem and our partner ecosystem at large being a core part of our business, and wanting to connect with them in a Shopify way.
Yeah, for sure. So just for scope, I guess is a good way. Like, how many apps are in the ecosystem currently? Like, is it 5,000?
I think it's 6. Last time
6,000? 6,000. So 6,000. And I'm sure you guys are like, what the hot ones are. I'm sure some of them are, 80-20, right? Probably is a fair assumption. Is it like, well, I guess first question, and this was something that crossed my mind, and I see a question in the chat here as well, wondering about it. What happens if there's this overlap of like, hey, here's our roadmap, we're going there, and you have an app that kind of is those features and set, and I'm sure those collide at some point. How does that work? Is it just transparency and it is what it is? So
like story of my life. Like this was every day,
Yeah.
The first thing is like what you as the person who's setting this up, and you being the company, have to really feel confident about is like, okay, we're going to attract people to this and tell them that they can make money doing this and that we want to do business with them. And also everybody at the table has to recognize that the only thing that is guaranteed is change. Like Shopify today, like we're not going to just stop, and it's our responsibility to build things for our merchants, and we will. But what our promise to you is, like the developer community, is we will try and be as transparent as possible with you in what our plans are, so that you can also change with us. And so that was another reason. For Unite was like, okay, how are we going to communicate where we're going so that there's no surprises? And like, listen, sometimes we're really good at that. Other times we failed on that. And those were hard, those were hard learnings at different times. But I think the lasting loyalty to the Shopify ecosystem has been that we aim to be as transparent as possible. And when there's reasons that we can't be, because sometimes there's like, publicly traded company reasons why we can't be. We think very hard about how this information is going to be communicated to partners. Like in a couple of occasions, we knew that things were coming, and we had partners sign additional NDAs and being like the ones that were going to be affected really, really directly, and being like, hi, this is going to be happening. And the other really important thing, this is going to be happening. We will not take you out of the App Store. And see, these are the ways that we think that you can continue to have value. And so I think it's always been about demonstrating that even though everything's changing, we want to keep the relationship going.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's great that you took that on. And I think it's a great lesson for anybody. I always find truth and transparency is your best way forward 100% of the time. And, if you can let them know what's coming, they can adapt, still make money. And even when they get into if it's not permanent when you get into it, it's less, of an issue at the end of the day when we know you're pivoting away from it. But that's fantastic. No, that's great.
It's hard though. I'm not going to say that it's like easy or that we've done it perfectly, but
well, no, because it's a really, but I mean, if you're launching an app ecosystem, this is the reality of it. And these are the things that you're going to have these conversations and be able to manage your vendors, because if you don't manage them well, they won't continue to work with you or build new apps once one maybe does become obsolete or not used as much.
Yeah. And I think like one of the best ways that we think about it, and that if you're building a team to do this, that you need to always watch for, is that it is actually in your partners, developers' best interest for you to always put your customer first, because then you will retain the customer and then they will be able to benefit from that. And so there has been circumstances where we've had to make changes that have effects. And we're like, listen, the reason we did this is because we saw the data on merchant usage of X, or we get X amount of support tickets on this specific topic. Like, it is our responsibility to meet our customers, and our customers are our customers. And that is who we're all building, right? Like, we're in business together, like me and the developer, me and the partner, we're serving the shared customer. And if you can keep the customer at the center of all of this, it's easier to make hard calls.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's absolutely true. And talking about that customer, I mean, someone was in here in one of the questions, they're talking about, well, some of the customer service reps might recommend certain things, but how does that bubble up? How do you become a top performing? Is that just demand? Is it really demand driven?
Yeah, it is demand driven. I think, some of the most successful apps really do a good job of paid marketing and SEO and, all of those things. A lot of our app partners, this is another, like I'd say, milestone, when all of our app partners started making partner programs themselves. It gets really
Partners
meta really
partners.
quick.
I like it.
But they start referring each other. So like there's a group of apps that, you install one, and then they would take that opportunity to be like, here's another thing that I think might be useful to you. And as long as they did it in a non-spammy way, we were really supportive of that, because it helps merchants find the right thing for their business. Right. And so I think it's like, you can't launch an app in the Shopify app store and like set it and forget it. Like, it's just like launching a store on the internet. Like, you have to actively go and get people. That happens, yes, both inside Shopify, but really, like, you go show up where the merchants are. There's super active Facebook pages, and in the old days, events, there's new events now. Just show up and talk to them. The other thing, merchants, man, do they trust each other? So you just get 10 merchants on your side to then talk about you.
Just as easy as that. That's pretty simple.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Getting to that point, I guess, is where the challenge might come in a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's not easy. If it was easy, we'd all do it,
Right. Exactly. And I'm sure, some of the developers in your ecosystem, that they're running real businesses. Like, they're huge. Like, the revenue's massive on that side as well. I think you said it earlier. I think it was 230 million in revenue coming off of the app.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And we have apps like Shippo, for example. They just raised a $45 million round.
Right, of course.
Klaviyo, $200 million round. And so these companies are full companies. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and you see
lots
the
of
evolution of
opportunity.
it. Well, yeah, exactly. And talking about evolution of like, from it, like you think about where Amazon was back in the day to Amazon owning their delivery and their logistics now. And like the only thing that's constant is change, right? And what else could you share? Is there anything else you could share like at an early stage, like thinking about it, like maybe even like finding your first developers? Is there a critical mass that makes sense where it's like, did they find you first? Is it because you're hitting that kind of scale and traction and you have enough users that people are finding you, or do you actively go out and get them?
So I think it's a combination, right? So depending on, if you're a B2B company, your customer, there's like an ecosystem that exists, right? Like a marketplace is just a tool to explore an ecosystem. And a marketplace is never going to fully capture everybody that's in the ecosystem. It's impossible because an ecosystem by definition is constantly evolving and growing, right? But a marketplace is this like little tool to walk around and find these people. And I think that if you can think about, okay, if you don't have a marketplace yet, you're like, there's an ecosystem out there, right?
Right.
So
right.
Who are they and what do they do? And then how do my customers find them? And then how can I help the customers who haven't found them yet find them? And so it's about uncovering your own ecosystem. So like I said, like the App Store actually really stemmed from this idea of these agency and freelance partners who were basically building Shopify online stores for people. They existed because people wanted things out of their online store, and they were building apps one off. So it already existed. We just needed to go and find it and package it up and then start encouraging other people to do it. And the good thing about like accessing the ecosystem before you build a marketplace is like those people are already bought in. Like they're like, yes, we both make money from the same customer. Maybe we should do something together.
Right.
And you kind of go from there. You will hit a point where it's like, okay, I think I have a lot of people, but how do I get to that next box? And that's when you really have to figure out what the future of your product is and how new entrants can play in that game, and then like hit the streets. Really, like developer advocacy is real. It's a skill, it's an art, and it's you got to find really great relationship people and make sure that they're not people who just hand out t-shirts. Find people who love technology, because that's the thing.
That's key. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So in terms of like resources and managing this, so when you started, call it 500 employees and you launched it, was there like, were you by yourself when you launched it, or was there already a team there? And then what did that look like? Is there like now 500 people working on it, or?
So when I wasn't there when they launched. I came a little bit while after. But at the time there was 2 people working on it full time and an intern.
Okay.
And
that's not very many. That's not very many. That's
not that many.
That's pretty lean. Okay.
Well, it was lean. The team that now works on it is hundreds and hundreds of people in all the different capacities though, right? So we have full stack teams on the App Store. We have an experts marketplace, which is a whole other tool to explore the ecosystem, a theme store, all kinds of different ways that partners interact with Shopify. And so there's people who build those. There's people who do the marketing, do the developer advocacy. We have a big governance team now, because when you have an ecosystem like this, there's things that happen and you need to make decisions and rules and enforcing them and things like that. So hundreds of people.
Hundreds, yeah. And I can imagine the coordination, because it's so dynamic and changing so often, that keeping hundreds of people informed is a challenge. Any tips on that?
I think actually it comes back to the fact the way that we've structured it is one team. Okay. So we don't have product and engineering doing something over here, and then the developer marketing team sitting in marketing. Like it's literally all a team that ladders up to the same VP. And it's always been like that we've had these 2 things together. And I think that creates the right feedback loops and helps everybody make good decisions faster.
Well, makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Because Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that earlier, just the scale from you guys going that quick and how you can scale up that quickly. But I guess you don't want silos, but at the same time, if you don't have silos, people are all over the place and can't stay up to speed. So
yes, it is yes, we're an 8,000 person company now. It's hard, but we're working on it. So yeah.
And for some of the partnership, is the programs that you've developed, like how have they evolved over? Is it has it been quite dynamic, or is it more of a strategy that's been rolled out and it's been in motion for a while now?
Yeah, I'd say on the app side, it's definitely dynamic, but it's pretty constant in the sense that, when I arrived, the nuts and bolts of the program weren't super figured out. They had started to be discussed, but like I said, when I showed up, we were going public in 10 months. So people were a little distracted. But what we really established is that it was important that we figure out what the economics of this thing is and what the relationship was, right? And I really believe when you're building any sort of partner program, even from day one, like make rules and be willing to bend them for growth, right? But make rules. A lot of people are just like, I'm just going to figure it out and we're going to go. And you start making all these one-off deals with people and then it's a freaking mess. So, so
how do you manage that?
Well, that was part of it, right? Like we have a 20% rev share inside our ecosystem. It was one, like making sure that was being well communicated, two, that it was being enforced, but three, that we were making it easy from a technical perspective to actually do that. Cause like putting a burden on all these people and also doing the exchange is like, that was hard. And that, I think was an early lesson in like what you need to do to set yourself up for scale. And then over time, like those fundamentals, like 20% rev share still exists today. And the relationship between apps and Shopify is relatively still the same. We've started to layer different programs on for Plus, which is our enterprise offering. And that looks a little bit different because there's a sales cycle involved in that. But otherwise, we've tried to keep it as simple as possible, like managing expectations and trying to help people enable them to build their business. You don't want to like change the rules every 2 months.
Yeah, fair enough. I think interesting, you talked about the 20% rev share. I think that's like super important for people to understand. It's lucrative, but you need a decent rev share to entice people to follow through with what they want to do, right? To follow through with building it out and be incentivized to continue to do it, even when they know things are going to change. It's lucrative enough, even in a short window, for them to make a lot of money. And I think a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, like they sometimes they want to hold on to too much and not share it, and ultimately hurts their growth.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I have tons of empathy. Like I've had the rev share conversation, I don't know, 1 million times. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to doing business together. Like, as I said, I believe I'm in business with partners and we are serving a shared customer and we both bring something to the table. And in order for this to be a meaningful partnership, then we have to be in business together. And my view of being in business together is like, we share in what we are, but in the profits, and we know that you're committed, and then it helps us do things like have hundreds of people work on this stuff. And also ultimately we think it's a better experience for merchants to be able to pay for these things inside their Shopify. And that's what we offer. So it's like, when you buy an app on your phone, right? Like you just pay Apple and you forget about it. And because if somebody surfaces you a credit card page, you're like, don't put my credit card in twice. And so we try to balance that.
Yeah.
In that decision.
I'd love to circle back just to the conference, and one day you decided to it, but like even leading up to that conference, what were the things you were kind of doing leading up? And then like, was there a trigger moment where you're like, we need a conference? Like, was there a moment where that just the light bulb went off?
So it's an interesting story because in Shopify, like a lot of tech companies, we take a couple of days in the year for hack days, right? And you can work on whatever you want. I was in San Francisco at the time, and we didn't have an office there at the time. So I was like working in my apartment. And it's hard to do hack days from your apartment when everybody else is in an office. And so I went and like, was like, I'm going to write what a developer conference would look like. And I sort of like came up with this idea, what the content would be, why we would do it. I went as far as like getting quotes from like various venues in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then I shot it off to a woman named Atlee Clark, who was head of events at the time. And I was like, look at this cute event I did. It's like for 150 people. It was like a meetup. Like it wasn't even, but it had some good content in it. I'll give myself that. And she wrote back, she's like, yes, I love it, but times 10. And I was like, what? And then the two of us got together, and she really just saw like what I was trying to do with the business. She thought it was this huge opportunity. And you know, she's a brand person. So it was like, I think this is what we need for our brand right now. And like, you and I are going to go and figure out how we pitch this to the execs. And luckily they were slightly skeptical, but had enough faith in the two of us to go and figure it out. And then we did it, and we had 1,000 people at a venue in San Francisco for 2 days. And at the end, you know, Toby, our CEO, was like, so what are the dates for next year? And we're like, okay. Okay. So yeah, so it was a little bit more organic and just like right place, right time. And it worked. And they're planning that the dates are getting announced next week, I think, for this year.
Yeah. When conferences come to light again. Exactly. So how many years, is it 5 years or like how
5.
long years have you done it? 5?
Yeah,
okay, cool.
5,
Yeah. I mean, and you see this, you know, you think about Salesforce and Dreamforce, right? Like you see this, and I mean, I guess a good hack for what you said, that little organic meetup, right, is your first stage. You know, maybe a lot of the people watching don't have the scale yet, but even that organic meetup, your online meetup, whatever it might be, could be that first step in that direction. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how all these like partner on partner programs evolved, because they all hung out at Unite, and they were like, we should sell each other's stuff. And then they did. And they were like, are we allowed to do this? I'm like, I think so. Can't see why not. Go for it.
I sell to that customer too.
Yeah,
you sell them that. I sell them this. Oh, okay.
yeah, exactly.
I think this could work.
Yeah,
absolutely. And are you guys going global with that, or is
with Unite? Well, it'll be digital. It'll be digital.
Digital.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and then,
so we're hoping we have an amazing team on it to create this really cool immersive experience, and it's going to be very, very developer-y this year. Sometimes we go a little bit more product. Sometimes, like depending on what we're explaining, but this year will be pretty tech heavy. So it'll be fun.
I'm seeing an interesting question here, just in terms of team structure. Is there like, do you have like a business development team that's actively outbounding to try and grow it? Or is it more just inbound word of mouth ecosystem organic scale?
Yeah, at this point, like we don't have to do as much outbound. We have strategic partner managers, and they are responsible for certain kinds of portfolios. So let's say like marketing tech, or backend tech, or shipping and delivery, and whatever. And they become domain experts and really understand what's going on in the market, who are the new startups, who is doing well in our app ecosystem, et cetera. But if we go back, let's say 4 years, those people existed, but they did do more outbound. So it was, and we really made the decision, like once we were at a certain size, we really did a good job of saying, okay, now instead of everyone knowing the entire platform, like go and know part of it, make friends with the product managers in that part of Shopify so that you understand where the product's going, and that you can help them understand what partners want to do with their part of the product, and then vice versa, be able to go to partners and developers and help them understand what we're doing. And so really have a domain expertise, which I think was really worth it. Another structure part actually that you've just made me think of, so I hope it's cool if we go this way, that absolutely. We did really early, that I feel like, you know, sometimes success is the absence of something not happening. So one thing that we did early was, established an approvals team that was distinct from the partnership team. And that might sound obvious, but at the beginning, when you have so few resources, like we had a whole bunch of people who were, going out and meeting app developers, trying to get them on the phone, the ones we already had. And they were also responsible for like the back end of getting them in the app store. And luckily, nothing bad happened with that, but it was like, it's a conflict of interest at some point, right? What we did was we established an approvals team that then operated very separately from the people who did all the glad handing. And then that evolved again to create another team for governance. But when you start getting into, we get, I don't know at this point how many submissions we get a week, but it's pretty high, and you have to go through them and make sure that they're, not just that they're like safe and they do what they say, but like that they're good and that they do exactly what they say. And that takes a lot of work, but it's a thing. If you can establish that early, it gives integrity to your ecosystem that is both, it's valued by both your internal teams because they know that that's happening, and then externally because good app developers don't want to be in an app ecosystem with bad ones.
Right, absolutely. So you have an internal QA team that's just like everything and just like put it through the ringer, make sure it's working before there's any approvals going out. Yeah.
Before a merchant touches it, they test
everything. Yeah, for sure. I got to touch on metrics a little bit, like, and how did you get, just with the evolution too, because I know there's a lot of earlier stage people who will be joining this. So like, what would be some metrics you'd recommend at an early stage, and maybe some red flag metrics too, if you have some of those that, people should watch out for?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like at the early stage, it's like in anything in early stage, it's like your growth metrics, like.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like pure, just like how many people are going to developer.yourcompany.com? How many people are reading your API docs? How many people are even requesting an API key? And then how do you, and then how much are your customers interacting with those people? Right. Yeah. And at the early stage, we had a very low bar for like interaction, right? It was like, they looked at the app store. Yes. Like that was the thing. But I don't think it was the wrong thing to pay attention to, because what we were just trying to figure out is like how this marketplace would work and how these two entities would interact and what was Shopify's role in it. So how are we helping or how are we hindering?
Right.
And then over time, as we've gone, we obviously have more sophisticated metrics. We have more sophisticated data. And it comes back to what I said earlier. We've really like focused in on the metrics that are important to our customers. Like I said, I think it's like the average Shopify store has 6 apps installed. Like we don't want Shopify stores, like the goal is not to have a Shopify store have 100 apps, but if they have 6 apps that they interact with on a weekly basis, like that's telling us there's value in what they have, and that it's working. That is even increased when we know that they're paying for, right? So yes, we report the revenue that we get from the app store, but the way that we think about it is that like there's value creation here that our customer is willing to pay for above and beyond Shopify. And so therefore that is a necessary and hopefully good app and expenditure for that business. And then we really look at like how merchants are using the app store. Are they finding what they want? Are they converting? How many like support tickets we get on third-party apps, et cetera. But really have focused less on like how many people are applying to be an app in the app store to like how are our merchants driving value from that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's I could see it, and it evolves, and your metrics evolve obviously as your company's evolving, for sure. Do you guys ever look at it from like a market share perspective? Like if we can get apps that cover an area, it will help us kind of lock into a certain market share. Did you ever have any strategic like outreach to think about?
I didn't. I cannot guarantee that the team that looks at it right now isn't doing that. I think, for us, it really comes back to the product. And so it's less about market share and more like, do we have the best in class in the market on our platform? And are we working with them in a way that makes sense? I think, like if you're a startup that's like thinking about this and how you either participate in in these ecosystems or build one yourself, I think one of the decisions that was made really early that you should make early is whether you want to be an open ecosystem or a closed ecosystem. Shopify took the open ecosystem route. It means hundreds of people have to work on it. And we have governance teams and we have all of these things. And they're sort of like out of the box ways to work with Shopify. But then other companies took really different tacks. Like I remember at the time, Shopify and Square were sort of like the same size. And we were just like trying to dance around each other a little bit. And they made a conscious choice to have a closed ecosystem. So for in every market or every piece, they chose like 2 to 3 partners. And that was it. And so there's an argument to be made that that's good for a business owner. They don't have to make a decision. They're just like, okay, I need an email marketing tool. And they can see those 3 email marketing tools and they pick it and that's it. But then what it did ultimately, and you can see in our company's valuations, I'm not saying it's all about the App Store, but maybe, is that what the open ecosystem did is like it constantly let new entrants into the market, right? And so we could take brand new startups. There's a great customer service app called Gorgeous. And like we met them when they were like, 4 people in San Francisco, and they've built like an amazing product. And had we said it's only Zendesk, then we would have missed Gorgeous. And hey, for some companies, Zendesk is perfect. For other companies, Gorgeous is perfect. And we didn't have to miss that. And I think that's what really created our moat from like, if you go with Shopify, don't worry. Every cool new thing that comes up, you'll be able to get it and it will be able to connect to your Shopify.
Like making that decision, are there, like, what are some of those big considerations? Is it like, are there any like by vertical, by product? Is there anything you could like kind of moves the needle one way or the other?
I mean, it's just how committed you are to it. Managing open ecosystem is way harder, 100%. There's just like harder, more people, more problems, but more people, more opportunity, more innovation, more, but it all comes with it. And so it's like, as a company, are you willing to invest in this? Not just from hiring a head of developer advocacy, but like, are you willing to get a director of engineering to build all the backend for this stuff? Are you willing to put in, data products to find anomalies to then have a governance team look into what's going on and make sure that, something bad isn't happening to a merchant? Like you've got to really commit to managing a large ecosystem. For some people, they don't know. I'd advise, if you're not sure, start closed, then go open. I don't know how many people here remember when Jack Dorsey had to get up on stage at Twitter's old developer conference Flight and apologize, because basically Twitter just started shutting down APIs, right? And didn't tell anybody. And then 2 years later, they were like, oh, joking, we do actually want people to build with Twitter. And so he went and was like, I'm so sorry. And everyone was like, and they lost them forever, right? So they
went open to closed and then went back, tried to go back.
And then they tried to go back to open, and like, it was really messy. It's like a great case study in how not to do developer relations. And so anyways, it's like, if you're trying to figure it out, I would go pick people, still have rules, and then open gradually. Or if you're really committed to open, then just start open and just go at it.
But you need capital to support it. So, if you go open and you don't have the people to support it, then it won't end well. It's fair enough.
You don't need hundreds of people, but like at least like 2 people who can do relationship stuff, and then a part-time designer and engineer, and you're good.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, we're getting close to it. I'd love, I always like framing it. And this was always a popular question I always see is like, if you could do it again, what are some of the things you would do differently? And which is always a tough question. And I always find personally myself, it's like, well, it's not just one thing. It's like 100 little things I would do differently. But is there broad strokes that you could paint that in?
Yeah. Like, how much time do you have? Like, there's a million things I would have done differently. I think one goes back to that, like that Rev Share thing and setting rules. Just to start, we had this like 20% thing, and then we had like a sort of broken way for people to get that money or not get that money. Anyways, it was very messy. And then we put some time into making that better. And then we had to go and like enforce it and like make sure that everybody started using the billing API, really like lay that foundation. It ended up taking, like, I hired this really, really smart guy, and it was basically his job for an entire year. And I think about like what I paid him and other things he could have been doing. And it was like, it was killer. And I don't look back on it and say like we made a mistake. It was just like, if I could go back, I would say that would be the first thing I would have fixed when I showed up. But I didn't know enough to know that that was the thing that we should have fixed. But laying out what your economics are and like what the rules of the road are going to be is like the first thing you should do, and get alignment internally on that. Because another thing is, when you start something like this, as your company grows, you constantly have to do internal advocacy for this too, because you're going to get engineers and PMs from other companies who don't build this way. And they'll be like, I'm not building an API for that. Or I'm building it, it's just an internal API. I don't need to document it like that. And you're like, this is the reason why we do this, and like, and explain it. And then most of them are like, oh, I get it now. And you're like, right. But you have to know that you have to constantly talk about that, that value, and make sure that leadership is on board. Because it's a tricky thing. And if your CEO or head of product and head of engineering is not on board, like, don't do it. Like, don't try and go bottom up. Like, it should come, it has to be a core part of your business and your product.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and it's funny, and the overlap with what Boast does too. I mean, we preach documentation also, because we use it in a different way. We use it to help you recover your R&D and your shred credits. But that documentation is exactly what we need to help build out our cases and our claims. So the importance of documentation kind of increases dev velocity, transparency. So, you know, I think something for people to take away who might be listening to this. So yeah, pretty cool. From that perspective, like, you know, hitting the top of the hour here, and really appreciate your time and everything. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with, you know, some of the viewers here today?
Yeah. An app ecosystem or a marketplace to expose your ecosystem or whatever it is can be such an amazing growth vector for your business. And probably more importantly, a way to make your product even more valuable to people. I think what we've seen at Shopify is the power of all of this technology coming together, and really smart people trying to solve problems for, you know, a lot of our customers, entrepreneurs who've never had an online store before. These are not necessarily sophisticated technology users. And it can be such a rewarding thing to go into business together. But I'd also I think the three things is like, make sure you internal alignment, make sure you have it before you start. This should not be a marketing team or sales team pet project, because it will never work.
Right.
So deep internal alignment. And if you are in charge of this thing, continuing to drive alignment on the value. To like, have rules, make the rules, figure out your rules before you start. You can be flexible on the rules, but have them, because back ending them is really painful. And then, never lose sight of who your customer is. If you're building one of these things, it can be enticing to like start thinking about your partners or your developers, like, but we have to do this for them, and we have to do this for them. And it's actually in everybody's interest if you all just focus on the shared customer, because you will build a better thing, and then you will all be more successful.
Amazing. And for anybody out there who might be building apps, how do they submit it for approval? Can they just go to Shopify and submit it there?
Yeah. Sign up for a partner account, partners.shopify.com. And all of our documentation is at developers.shopify.com. And explore, see what you can build, talk to a bunch of merchants about things that they need that they don't have, or if you already have a startup that hits them in some way already, you're part of the ecosystem, but you're just not in the marketplace, like, put in the marketplace, see your growth, and make it easier for merchants to find you, install you, pay for you, all those things.
Amazing. And thank you very much. I love your insights. Do you post a lot on LinkedIn? Do you post a lot of content? Can people follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. My LinkedIn inbox is a scary place, so I wouldn't go there. But LinkedIn for sure. Twitter more. So Atlee Clark on Twitter. Cool. And talk about all the things there.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today, sharing your insights. Atlee, fantastic conversation. And thank you for sharing with the community. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else learned a lot. And Atlee, thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks for having me.
You need some traction.